Here we are, 2 weeks out from the initial fluconazole treatment and 1 month out from the initial installation of the UV sterilizer. As you can see, the medication has essentially just obliterated any sort of bryopsis or even green hair algae that had been in here just 2 weeks ago. If you refer back to that old footage, it was a carpet of grass basically at this point. And even in the kind of the hard to reach places that you would expect it to kind of hang around, like there was a lot on this rock before, completely gone. So I'm really impressed with that. I just did the standard treatment regimen. There's plenty of other YouTube videos on that out there, but highly recommend the fluconazole treatment as kind of like the last push to eradicate any sort of nuisance algae out of your system once you've got all the other parameters kind of worked into play here. An important side note that I discovered after about 2 weeks of use with the sterilizer is it came with these shipping stabilizers. So these are pieces of plastic that hold the bulb in place so that the bulb doesn't break while it's being shipped. Some other brands had mentioned in their user manuals that you needed to remove these before you began operation because the plastic could melt or, in a worst case scenario, actually catch fire. So this is after about a week and a half to 2 weeks of use. The plastic itself had already gotten into this kind of browned state, so I took that out right away. I discussed on a couple online forums if this was meant to stay in there as a stabilizer or remove if it was just due to shipping. There was no documentation regarding these pieces on any of the schematics that were included with the device, so I just took them out, and as of now it's been 2 months in and I haven't had any issues with it. And as far as let's say the UV sterilizer and getting rid of the dinoflagellates, that seems to be working pretty well too. There's a bit of a bloom after the fluconazole treatment, and we would expect that with all that extra nutrients that had been locked into the system. But what I did is I just kind of spot treated with hydrogen peroxide in a syringe, and I just applied that to the specific areas where the dinoflagellates were, and kind of the synergistic effect of all these different things coming into play have really cleaned up this tank. I'm finally in a position where I can look at this and say I'm happy with how things have worked out at this point in the tank's cycle. And it should be noted that this tank is fairly new in the scheme of things. I set this tank up only about 8 months ago, so it's still in that quote-unquote ugly phase. This will be our final update on this tank for a while, at least for the project that you've been following here. Right now, this is about 2 months out from the initial installation of the UV sterilizer, and give or take a month or so from our fluconazole treatment, and things are looking as good as I could have expected them to. The bryopsis is completely gone. There is not a wisp of green hair algae anywhere in the tank. There's a little bit of kind of a green mottling over the rocks. That's basically in about a 1-to-1 ratio with the coralline algae, so I'm not gonna knock that at all for anything. My need to clean the glass has gone down significantly. I probably use the scraper on the glass about once every 3 or 4 days, but really honestly I could leave that for a week and be content with it. The rocks are doing excellent. The sand bed is doing excellent too. Kind of when I throw on this like hyper color system here, you would be able to see the dinoflagellates there if there were any. There's maybe just a little speckling there, but the sterilizer has done a great job of keeping any sort of spore or bacterial bloom in the water column of the dinoflagellates, sterilizing it before it can settle onto the sand bed and propagate there. So everything is looking real good here. We'll do a little bit of a tour of the inhabitants. As you can see down here, the system itself is exactly how we left it. I've done about 2 changes of the filter on the inside of the canister filter. That's no trouble at all with this system. You just pop that there, pull up the tubing system, everything stays attached. You don't have to undo any tubes. You just knock that back in place and put the cap on when you're done cleaning out the filter. So this system, again, has been a slam dunk. I think anybody who is considering this setup, you can fully assume that you will get the results that you're looking for with the Sun filter and a 407 on a reef tank that's about 40 gallons in size. And an important thing to note is the hugely positive effect that removing the Bryopsis and algae from my tank has had on my corals. The nutrients in my system, I try to keep it pretty low, and that algae and that seaweed was just sucking up all the excess nutrients and almost kind of starving out my corals. They weren't able to compete with the Bryopsis that's in there, and now that that's gone, they've really been flourishing. I've seen them expand the amount of territory that each colony is holding, and the polyps themselves are looking fuller, more colorful, and just all around healthier. I mean, these guys especially healthier than they ever have before.